According to Marco, there are over 20 million islands in the One Piece world distributed across 4 oceans, the Grand Line and the Red Line. We do know about at least 180 of them, and today we will go and explain all of them, starting with the East Blue and Luffy's home island. This is Dawn Island, the home of the Goa Kingdom, and we've spent a lot of time here in the story. Now obviously, Luffy was raised right here in Fuchsia Village, but that is far from the only part of this big island that we know about. Because turns out most people on this island live in this big city right here, and these are the upper class royalty and merchants, but we also have the so-called Grey Terminal, which is the trash mountain outside the city, where the poor people and bandits have to scrape by with what they can take from the trash of the rich people. Then right beyond here is Mount Corvo, where Luffy first stayed with the mountain bandits before he and his friend Ace and Sabo made their own little hideout so they could fight and hunt giant animals, like, you know, is every normal young boy's dream. What you probably don't know though is that the Goa Kingdom is actually one of the 170 countries who are a part of the world government. And what that actually means is that they need to pay the so-called heavenly tribute to the celestial dragons, which is a stupidly large amount of tax money that they pay in exchange for being part of the government and thus getting protection from pirates by the Marines. On top of that, you also get to be part of the government council, such as the Reverie, which is where the rulers of the world come together every 4 years to make big decisions about the One Piece planet. Now, we do know a ton about Dawn Island, but that's not the case with every island we know about in One Piece. But we do know quite a little bit about the East Blue overall. It's actually called the weakest of the 4 blues, which I'm not quite sure about. I mean, it's weak unless you remember that it's the birthplace of the Pirate King Goldie Roger, the world's most famous criminal, Monkey D. Dragon, and a certain swordsman who will cut you even if you think about waking him up from his nap. So I would guess that it might not be considered the weakest by the end of the story, if you know what I mean, but there's definitely some weak pirates around these parts, no question. For example, take Goat Island right here. This is actually where Luffy and his new friend Kobe landed after escaping from the pirate Alvida and her ship. And there's not really much to talk about here, it's just a basic kind of rocky and foresty island, but in the manga, it was the base for the Alvida pirates, and that's pretty much all we know about it. So moving up the map, we have Shellstown, which is actually part of this huge island here called the Yotsuba Island region. And we don't know too much about the entire region, but Shellstown is of course where Luffy meets Zoro and defeats Captain Morgan. And this island is actually pretty tiny with basically just the 153rd Marine base and the town surrounding it. There is one other place we know about here though, so let's backtrack because while Luffy never visits this place, we do learn in a data book that the Satsuruzo Kingdom is the actual hometown of Kobe. Now we don't know exactly where this is, it is never clearly explained, which honestly is true for a lot of the islands in this video, but since we know that Kobe was taken by Alvida and her base is really close by, I'm just gonna assume that the Satsuruzo Kingdom is right around here. So let's keep the ship moving because next up is the Nagagutsu Kingdom, which is a world government kingdom ruled by King Furari, who we actually saw here arrive at the Reverie, and if you think he's stylish, that's because his kingdom is home to the world famous Giorno Armani fashion brand, which is kind of a ripoff of the real Giorgio Armani fashion brand in case you didn't realize. Fun fact, he also designs everything that all of the world nobles wear too. Now as we keep going, we have next Orangetown, which is part of the larger Organ Island chain here. This is where Luffy and Zoro meet Nami, but it's also home to the best boy in the entire story, Choo Choo. I just love this guy so much and love bringing him up when I have the chance. Now, Old Town here isn't actually all that old. The villagers only came here about 42 years ago when they were chased out of their old home by pirates. It really kind of sucks for them that their town got destroyed by pirates again, but at least this time they get to stay and rebuild. And from here, we're actually gonna need to backtrack on the map a little bit, and this next island isn't one that Luffy even went to. Buggy did though, because after the battle at Orangetown, Buggy's crew ended up on Kumate Island, where they were nearly eaten by cannibals on this island here that's shaped like a bear paw, which Kumate literally means in Japanese, bear paw. Now Buggy and his new friend Alvida showed up and saved them, and they all became one big happy crew again. And I actually want to keep moving in this direction here because we can't forget about Shimotsuke Village. And this is truly the swordsman village in One Piece. It's the home of Roronoa Zoro and where he first shared his dream to become the world's greatest swordsman. Nowadays, this village is home to the Ishin Dojo, but originally it was created 50 years ago by a group of citizens from Wano in the Grand Line, including Zoro's grandmother Furiko and this guy who was a very famous swordsmith and also the grandfather of Zoro's childhood friend Kuina. So if you like, it's kind of like a mini Wano on a budget, but with all the emotional trauma and extremely sharp objects attached. Then next up we have an island that's really interesting. It's not technically in the manga or the anime, but we do know it exists canon in the story. This is Six's island, and just like how Luffy washed out right after starting his adventure, his brother Ace also crash landed on this very island here. We actually learn about this in the Ace novel, and it was here that Ace found his Fire Devil Fruit before escaping the island and starting his journey to become a big shot pirate. And now let's jump back up to the main story islands, because after defeating Buggy in Orangetown, Luffy, Nami, and Zoro landed on this cute little island called the Island of Rare Animals, and its name is perfect because the crew met some truly bizarre creatures here like the lion pig, duck poodle, and the zebra ostrich. Pretty epic, but we also have one of the greatest afros in the story here with the treasure chest guy Gaimon, who got stuck here after his crew was searching a mysterious and abandoned treasure. After this, the crew then traveled to the Gecko Islands, which is an archipelago with many different small islands, but the only one we really know about is the one where we meet Usopp in Syrup Village. Now you may not know this, but this is actually a rather large island with multiple towns, even though we never get to see anything beside the village where Usopp grew up in. You know, hey, who needs anything else when you've got the best sniper in the world, Usopp, who the crew teamed up with to save the village from the cat claw wielding Kuro and his feline pirates. Now the main story trail here continues, as the next place in the East Blue is not technically an island, but I just had to include, of course, the Baratier because it is such an important location. Now, Sanji and Zeph really only opened this place up roughly 9 years before the story starts, after the pair nearly starved to death after being shipwrecked. But now they do feed anyone who's hungry, which led to the major conflict between Luffy and Dawn Creek. And Zoro, of course, got a major beatdown here from the world's strongest swordsman, Mihawk, as well. Next up though, let's hit some rapid fire islands here, because back up here we have Mirrorball Island, which is where the funky hypnotist Django went after the Straw Hats beat Kuro in Syrup Village. Django actually ended up joining the Marines here, but man, let me tell you, if you want to party, this is where you want to go in the One Piece world. They even have a massive disco ball here so you can dance the entire night away. Then we have the Frost Kingdom up here, which is another one of the world government affiliated kingdoms that we don't know so much about. We do know something about Kozia Island though, because this is the island that was attacked by Sanji's family, the Germa Kingdom, back when he was a child. But more importantly, this was the exact same moment that Sanji said, you know what, I'm kind of done with this family. I'll take my chances with pirates instead, and then he jumped ship. And honestly, fair, don't blame this poor kid at all, and good thing that he did. Now we do get another of the big ones though, and this time it's Nami's home island, Konomi. And just like Dawn Island, there are a bunch of locations here like Kokoyashi Village, which you'll remember, Arlong Park, and a few other smaller villages, including Gosa. Now, of course, this entire tropical paradise was basically enslaved by Arlong, who arrived 8 years ago, but before that, it was just a peaceful little island whose people love their tangerines. Turns out that Konomi wasn't the only island introduced in this very arc though, because we also learned about the Oikot Kingdom, because you see, Nami and her adopted sister Nojiko weren't born in Kokoyashi Village. No, their mom Belmare found them in Oikot after it was basically completely destroyed by pirates when Nami was still a baby. Now this island does have some pretty interesting details, because in the live action adaptation we can actually see a map that shows the northern part of the island resembling the shape of a sea serpent. Also, you might have realized that Oikot is just Tokyo spelled backwards, so that's a nice little Easter egg right there. Oda really loves doing that, like we'll see with Elbaf later as well. But buckle up now, because it's time to discuss one of the greatest mysteries in One Piece, and we can find it right here in the boring old East Blue. This is a massive country bridge called Tequila Wolf. Now, I don't think you quite understand the real scale of this thing. It is enormous, easily over 100 meters tall, and as long as, well, we don't actually know. We've never been told where this thing actually starts or where it goes, but it is one of the big 4 bridges that the world government has started building over 700 years ago. Like, that is absolutely insane. Imagine starting a group project that takes 7 centuries and still doesn't have a due date because who knows when it'll be done. It is so big that the slaves who built this bridge make a new village when the old one gets too far away from its construction site. It's legitimately a country where slaves live their entire life just, well, building this bridge. Of course, you probably remember that this is where Robin was sent during the time skip, where she and the other slaves were then rescued by the Revolutionary Army. And to this day, we've never gotten an explanation what these giant bridges are actually for. I mean, I think it's to connect all the islands so that the people don't have to sail around, or because the world is flooding, but we don't really know for sure at this point. What we do know, though, is the final stop of the East Blue, and that is Polestar Island, home of the world-famous Loguetown. And this town is known as the Town of Beginnings and Ends because it's actually where the former pirate king Goldie Roger was born and then later executed. It is also the scene of Roger's famous speech that started the Great Pirate Era by inspiring an entire new generation to search for his treasure in the Grand Line. So a full circle there in his story. But of course, you know that everything so far was just the minor leagues. The small pond, basically, if you want, where Luffy and the Straw Hats were the big fish. Now though, we're leaving the cozy East Blue, so it's time to talk about the rest of the One Piece world here. And there is just one problem. Getting there is an insane challenge in reality. Let's say you're Johnny Pirate here and you want to go see the world. Well, good luck, because you'll probably die before ever being able to even cross into any of the other 4 oceans. Why is that, you ask? Well, there are 2 things that separate the entire One Piece world. The Red Line, which is this gigantic landmass continent that circles the entire world, and you know, that totally wasn't geo-engineered as a way for the government to control the world. But then there's also the Grand Line, which is this strip of ocean that also goes all the way around the world just at a 90-degree angle. The problem is, it's the most dangerous sea you can possibly imagine, with giant sea monsters, freak weather, and crazy strong pirates and marines just waiting to sink your happy little pirate ship. So yeah, travel in the One Piece world is pretty rough. Like, suddenly a Sea King ate all your boats rough, if you want that comparison. Luckily for us though, the Straw Hats aren't your average old pirates, and they're headed to Reverse Mountain to start their journey through the Grand Line. And let's talk about this place here for a moment too, because there is a lot of really wacky geography and a lot of really weird weather in the entire One Piece world, but Reverse Mountain is right up there as one of the all-time weirdest things that exist. Water literally flows up this mountain from all of the 4 oceans and then pours down into the Grand Line. So to get to the Grand Line, you have to sail up the mountain, then come crashing down into the most dangerous sea in the world. Tons and tons of pirates don't even make it up and then back down. They just crash and sink right there, so this is no simple task. But you have to do it because the only other way into the Grand Line is to go through the Calm Belt, which, as we see right here, is home to the monstrous Sea Kings that can wreck most ships pretty easily. But once you come down the mountain, you reach the Twin Capes here, and do you see the cute little lighthouses we made here? Man, I love this map so much. I don't know, I'm really in love with it. Maybe we should turn this into merch. Let me know. Anyways, this is where the Straw Hats met the giant whale Laboon and Dr. Crocus. But at this point, I really need to talk about directions in the One Piece world because it's getting pretty confusing. You see, the regular north, south, east, and west don't really point like you'd expect from our world. Like, what even is north? This way? That way? Well, I've got you covered because basically the directions point towards the blue that share their name. Basically, directions are less geographic and a lot more vibe-based in One Piece, so north is the direction of the North Blue. But once you reach the Grand Line, you can basically throw any of these directions out the window anyways, because the weather and magnetic fields in the Grand Line completely screw up any compass. So instead, we're gonna have to use something called a lock post. Now, these devices basically lock onto the magnetic field of the next island and guide you there that way. At least that's the simple explanation that we get for how they work. There might me and very likely is much more behind that. But also, there are a ton of different islands you can actually go to after entering through Reverse Mountain. 7 different paths that you can take through the first half of the Grand Line, in fact. And we do know a lot of these islands. Even a lot of the ones that the Straw Hats didn't visit, but there are honestly so many that we have no clue about, but I'll do my best to talk about the ones that we do actually know here. So let's start with the very first islands that the Straw Hats visit, Cactus Island. And just like the name suggests, the island looks, well, like a big cactus with these very large rock formations and little rocks sticking out that are actually gravestones. Yikes. Now the Straw Hats found out very quickly that this is an island of bounty hunters who work for Baroque works, and they were very nearly killed in their sleep. In the end though, this is what the Straw Hats found out about Vivi's true identity, which started their entire journey to free her country. We'll get to that in a moment. First, let's go way off track to the Sabaody Archipelago here. Now this is actually where Usopp ended up during the time skip, and this island is legitimately one of the most terrifying ones in all of One Piece. Personally, I would take a volcano or a frozen wasteland before I come to Boyne, which is literally just a giant meat-eating plant that will do anything it can to devour you. Like, it opens its mouth. The island has a mouth. Ugh, that's not scenery, that's a horror movie. Seriously, no thank you. Luckily, Usopp though survived with the help of Heracles here, and he leveled up his slingshot and ammunition using the deadly plants he found here. But from deadly plants, let's move on to an island with deadly animals, because next up is Little Garden, where the Straw Hats found this island inhabited by ancient dinosaurs and, randomly, 2 giants, Dory and Broggy. This island has everything. Lava, bones the size of buildings, and 2 giants fighting over lunch from a century ago. But this island turned out to be really special for Usopp because my dude finally got to meet real giants, and even though the giant warriors almost killed each other, the Straw Hats did save them from the Baroque work agents at the end of the day. And here we also learn about a little book called The Bragman that is kind of like a logbook of many adventurers throughout the One Piece history that is gonna be a lot more relevant than we thought at that point. We also learned about this little island right here during this arc because this is Kyuka Island, which is basically just a nice little vacation spot where members of Baroque works like to relax when, you know, they have no work. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to chill right here? Like, it's got a giant umbrella that covers the entire island and all the resort spa vibes that you could ever want. If I were reincarnated in a One Piece world, I would want to go here first. Not all of the Baroque work agents have it that easy though, because on Rene's Island, Mr. 11 was captured by Captain Smoker and Tashigi, but we don't really know anything about what it looks like, so let's just keep the ship moving. Right to this next one, which is maybe the most disgusting place in all of One Piece. That's because Nanimonai Island is actually not an island at all. Nope, it's just a giant pile of poop. Yeah, that's a thing in One Piece. Honestly, it's impressive. You kind of have to respect the scale of this dump, and Nanimonai in Japanese, in case you're wondering, means nothing, because I guess there is nothing to see here. Anyways, not staying here any longer than we need to, so let's hop over to the next major spot, Drum Island. This is a winter island that you're probably familiar with these massive drum-shaped mountains, and there's a castle way up on the highest one of these, and then lots of towns spread around the coast. Of course, you and me know this as Chopper's home island, and also a pretty famous medical island that is home to some of the most legendary doctors in the story. But after Luffy and the crew beat down the old evil king Wapol, the citizens here changed the name of the island to the Sakura Kingdom in honor of the quack Dr. Hirolook's Cherry Blossom Snow. Now though, let's swap the cold for some heat over here on Sandy Island. Yeah, now this desert island is home to the kingdom of Alabasta. Oh, you thought the island was named Alabasta? Yeah, it's called Sandy Island. Home of Vivi's family and one of the most complex islands that we know of both geographically and politically. Check this out. This place is super old. I'm talking like the Royal Palace is one of the single oldest things that we know about in One Piece, dating back 4,000 years in the past. On top of that, Alabasta was one of the original 20 kingdoms that helped form the world government way back 800 years ago during the Void Century, meaning that there's been some serious political drama here over the years, but let's just focus on the island over overall because there are a ton of small and medium-sized towns around the island that we actually got to see. From oasis villages like Yuba to booming port towns like Nanohana. Then of course there's the casino city Rainbase, which let's be honest, that's where I'd want to be. Then of course we have the capital city of Arubana, where Luffy and the crew saved the island from the Warlord Crocodile's evil plan to take over the entire kingdom for good. Oh yeah, and this is of course also where Robin joined the crew afterwards. So thank you Alabasta for giving us the best girl. That's a pretty big deal and one of the great arcs and sagas in One Piece overall. Luffy also reunited with his brother Ace here, which is perfect because we're gonna shift down to the South Blue next, where Ace was actually born. And we're just gonna casually cross the calm belt here like it's not a death trap and start our journey right here. And even though the Straw Hats have never actually been to the South Blue, there is a lot going on here, believe me. People like the Straw Hat shipwright Frankie, Luffy's rival Eustace Kid, and Luffy's brother Ace were all born here. Which by the way, now that I'm thinking about it, Frankie buddy, if you're watching this, just don't go near any admirals or emperors, okay? You saw what happened to Ace and Kid, right? So like, just stay away from that. And our first real island here is the Brisk Kingdom, where the absolute only thing we know about it is that they seem to be very invested in exploring. That's because one of their ships even reached Skypiea hundreds of years ago, and we know that because the Sand Bliss nearly fell on the Straw Hats right after they left Alabasta. Then right down here we have Batarilla Island, which is actually a super important one because do you remember why? This is the birth island of Portgas the Ace. Yeah, that's right. This tropical island is the place that Roger got down with Ace's mother Rouge. Seemed like a pretty nice place until the world government came by and killed every single baby here to try and stop Roger from having a kid. Yeah, that happened too. So not really a happy time for them, but at least the whole island didn't go crazy like the Centaurea Kingdom, because at this place we do know that the locals joined forces with the Revolutionary Army to fight for control of the country. And the rebels eventually won, which led to another kingdom being freed from the rule of the world government. Now this next island though is a big one, and we learned a whole lot more about it during the Egghead Island arc. This is the fabled Sorbet Kingdom, which sounds sweet but delivers scoops of trauma instead. This is the home island of the former warlord, former revolutionary, the bear man himself, Bartholomew Kuma. Yeah, he was born here, then kidnapped, then later returned with Ginny and had a pretty great life for a while, which sadly didn't last too long, but let's talk about the island instead. Like a lot of places, it is basically divided into the rich and the poor half. For a long time it was allied with the world government and ruled by King Bekuri. Eventually though, the oppression got so bad that Kuma and the poor citizens overthrew Bekuri, and Kuma helped lead the country for a good while. So far, the South Blue's looking less like a sea and much more like a factory for emotional damage to me, but one place here is a literal factory for toys though, which is the evil Black Drum Kingdom. Because do you remember the evil king that Luffy kicked out of Chopper's home island? Well, he ended up right here, and thanks to his devil fruit powers, he made some special metal, sold some super popular toys, and became rich enough to be named king of the entire island. This whole place then joined the world government, so it's all evil all around, just like the name of the island suggests. Next up is an island though known for its fighting, because we have the very creatively named Karate Island. Now we've actually never seen this place in the story, but you can basically learn any kind of martial arts here because this guy's a Cypher Pole agent who grew up here and surprisingly learned boxing, not karate, huh. On the other hand, we have visited the next island though, because this is Torino Kingdom, where Chopper was sent during the time skip. And this island is actually quite the mystery. You see, this giant tree here that takes up most of the place, it was kind of hinted to be a tiny atom tree that is said to be the strongest type of tree in the entire world. But when Chopper was sent here, we learned that the people were basically at war with giant birds that live on top of the tree, but Chopper here helped them resolve their problems, and in return they shared their library of medical books with our reindeer doctor. And moving on, we have yet another place that had a rebellion. This is Toomey, where Kuma and the revolutionaries helped the locals win a civil war 15 years ago, and Kuma really just walked in, ended the civil war, and then dipped. Pretty iconic if you ask me. This next island though is home to some of the baddest pirates in the new generation, because this is Kutsuku Island, which is home to none other than Eustace Kid and his closest friends, Killer, Heat, and Wire. We actually learned about the existence of this place in a question action corner where apparently Kid and Killa both loved the same girl before she was killed by a rival gang. So Kid joined together with some of the other gangs, took down his enemies, and then set out to sea where they named their ship after their fall in love. Quite the tragic love story. But now we've got some other islands that have gotten us some of the strongest marines in the entire world instead. First is Taya Kingdom here, where the newest admiral, Green Bull, was originally a police officer. Now Green Bull is of course not as cool as Kuzan, and we also learned that the chilly former admiral is from the so-called Vespa Kingdom. And unfortunately this island is basically a complete mystery to us, but man, I really want to know if they just all ride on Vespas around here, like the little motorcycle scooters. And in fact, the actor that Kuzan was modeled after famously rode a Vespa in the role, and that was the whole inspiration for Oda for this island. Before we get stuck here though, let's cruise over onto the Roshuan Kingdom here, which is basically One Piece's version of Russia, I guess. It's a world government kingdom ruled by King Beer the Sixth's based goated name. And at this point, I'm pretty convinced that the world government just hands anyone a kingdom that, you know, has a cape and a drink, I guess. But I mean, still based name. All right. With that though, that's basically the South Blue. And at this point, I just need to point out that there are a ton of islands in the story that we actually do know about, but we have no idea whatsoever where they actually are located. And a lot of them are world government affiliated kingdoms like these you can see right here, and we met many of them during the Reverie. And as you can see, Oda put a ton of time into their names and their rulers. Clearly, he was very hungry when he thought these up, like with names like the King Tacos or the Beef Kingdom. Makes me hungry now. My god. How long of the video is left? Oof, okay. All right. We're gonna go hop back onto Paradise now instead though and finish the first half of the Grand Line. Yay. Starting with Jaya right here, which is basically a pirate's paradise. But the island itself is one of the coolest in the story. It's in the shape of a skull, at least before half of it was blown up into the sky by the knock-up stream, and on top of that, it was home to the city of gold, Shandora. So yeah, an absolutely awesome place for a pirate, and this is also where Luffy met Blackbeard for the first time too. Next though, we're gonna go up, way up, because it's now time to hit the Sky Islands. And Skypiea here is like a wonderland being completely built in the clouds. And it basically has its own ocean up here with the White Sea and the White Sea. And that's basically just the quote-unquote water, because the islands here are also all made of clouds. Just, you know, a very dense version that you can actually stand on and build things out of. And just here in Skypiea, we have Angel Island where the Skypieans live, and then there is the Hidden Cloud Village where the Shandian people live, and then of course there is Upper Yard, which is the only Earth up here because it is the half of Jaya that was shot up into the sky. And this place is truly special in many ways because this place hides the ruins of the City of Gold and the Golden Belfry. It's of course also where the Lightning Man Enel camps out with his army and priests, at least he was, until Luffy and the Straw Hats came and knocked them all out. Now Skypiea is far from the only thing in the sky though, because in One Piece you can actually go up to the moon, which weirdly enough has more advanced technology than most kingdoms on the ocean and seems to be connected to the true mysteries of the story in a very big way. For now though, let's come back down to the sea though, and there is someone coming with us because one of Enel's priests, Gidatsu here, fell down onto the next island we're going to. This here is the Ukari Hot Spring Island, and this one is actually really awesome. Like, I would want to go there. I think I have a list now of places I would want to go to, but the cool thing here is that it was basically created during the story, because after the Straw Hats beat down Enel and his priests, Gidatsu fell here and the man just started digging. He was on a one-man mission, and they eventually dug so much that they connected Ukari to Sandy Island and created a brand new resort town with all the hot springs you could ever want. And honestly, what else could you ask for? This sounds great. Brook, on the other hand, wasn't having such a hot time on Namakura Island because when he was sent here during the time skip, he was first mistaken for the devil and then just straight up got kidnapped. Not exactly a happy place for our favorite musician or the people who live there because they were constantly suffering from poverty. And it's actually all because of the Long Arm tribe who live on Kanzan Island right here. This is actually where Brook was taken after he was being kidnapped, but I guess it all worked out for him because he then went on to become a world famous musician. It is, dare I say, the classic Satanist to record label executive pipeline, I guess. Then we have Fool Shout Island, which is the home of Sabo's bestie Koala. Now this island has some serious cactus vibes too, but it also has some intense racism here, fun cacti and racism, because this is the island where the Fishman's son pirates were ambushed by Marines even though they were trying to bring Koala back to her home. For now though, let's jump over here to Banado Island, which is the scene of one of the most important battles in the entire story. You know what I'm talking about? Well, the island itself isn't really anything special, just a normal place with a rundown village, but this is actually where Ace finally catches up to Blackbeard. And I kind of wonder what's left of the island at this point after their battle, because man, they went all out with both their fire and darkness powers. Like, if this place was run down before, it's probably pretty much non-existent at this point. But it's time to hit the main journey again, join the Straw Hats, because after Skypiea, we went to one of the strangest places in the entire world, Long Ring Long Land. An S-tier island in a, well, C-tier arc, I would say. Now, this place is full of animals that are just too long, like straight up. They have long necks, long legs, long arms, even long noses. I mean, Usopp was pretty much right at home here, let's be honest. They all live on this circle of 10 islands that are connected by a path that only surfaces once a year, which is exactly when many of them migrate to a new island. The craziest thing about this place, though, is that the strange tides may actually be related to the giant tsunami called the Agua Laguna that is a certified natural disaster for Water 7. Which I gotta say is a real shame, because Water 7 is definitely one of my all-time top islands just based on sheer design. I mean, look at it. It is beautiful, looking like a giant fountain with buildings stacked up and water flowing down from the top, and the entire vibe being pretty clearly inspired by Venice. You can also see the shipbuilding yard here on the map, which the city is famous for, but the real tragedy is that the entire island is basically constantly sinking, because each time that the Aqua Laguna hits the island, it falls more and more underwater, so they've had to kind of continuously build new buildings on top of the old ones that are now underwater. Now though, the mayor, Iceberg, wants to make the entire city one big floating ship, but this island was key for the Straw Hats in so many ways. For one, it was their first real conflict with the world government, and they later got their brand new ship, the Thousand Sunny, and picked up Frankie as their shipwright. But Water 7 is also super important to the world government, because this is the place where the sea train was created too, and just like it sounds, this is an actual train whose rails float on top of the ocean and allows the train to run on top as well. And this is actually really key, because it once again allows people to get from island to island without the dangers of sailing on a ship. And there's actually a number of islands connected via the sea train. First off, we have the shift station here where the Straw Hats first meet Kokoro and Chimney. There's also San Faldo, which is known as a carnival town. St. Poplar, which is actually famous for its lumber for some reason, and this is where Frankie came to buy the atom wood off the black market. And then yet another connected island here is Pucci Island, where I definitely want to go because it is known as the gourmet city. But the last and most important connected island is Enies Lobby, the judicial island of the world government. And the Straw Hats of course chased ZP9 and Robin here, and boy do I still have some big questions about this place, because it is known as the always afternoon or never night island, because somehow it is always sunny and day here. Every day, all year, all the time, just pure sunshine. Basically California, I guess. And there's this massive gaping hole in the ocean that we just assume was made by the government's secret flying weapon that also destroyed Lulusia, which we might or might not go to later. But in this place, in the courthouse of the world government, prisoners are brought to sentencing, and then those who are convicted, basically everyone at this point, are sent through the gates of justice, which you can see right here are these 3 mysterious massive structures that actually create their own special current in the ocean, which basically allows them to control who can travel between the 3 main strongholds of the Marines. And obviously, this is where Luffy and the Straw Hats officially declared war on the world government and saved Frankie and especially Robin. So after all the heavy stuff, instead let's shift to a more pleasant island, because over here we have Momoiro Island, which is the home of the Kamabaka Queendom. Now this heart-shaped island is where Sanji trained during his time skip, and you'd think that he'd love to be on an island full of love, but oh no, My guy needed some therapy after his training hell because of Ivankov and all of their followers. At this point in the story, Momoiro is now also the new headquarters of the Revolutionary Army after their base in the New World was actually destroyed by Blackbeard. And then we have one of the most mysterious and creepiest parts of the ocean with the Florian Triangle. Now, the Straw Hats had to sail through this very misty stretch of sea inspired by the Bermuda Triangle after leaving Water 7. Tons and tons of ships get lost here each year due to mysterious circumstances, but the crew ran into Brook and the floating megaship Thriller Bark here as well. And it is also home to one of the greatest mysteries in all of One Piece with these enormous shadowy monsters which have to this very day never been explained either. So as much as I like to talk about them, let's instead talk about Thriller Bark here, because this thing is a ship and an island at the same time, and somehow the former warlord Moria turned an island in the West Blue into his ship and now just sails around on it as his own floating zombie paradise, I guess. Yeah, not for the faint of heart, I guess, but somehow they float this island all around the world, because besides going from its home in the West Blue to the Grand Line, they also sailed this thing over to the New World. How is that possible? Did he sail it through Fishman Island? I have no idea. Next up though is Karakuri Island, which is the original home of the genius scientist Dr. Vegapunk. He actually created the future land Baltimore, which turned this wintry island into a mechanized wonderland that includes machine-augmented animals, and Frankie was sent here during the time skip, where he then studies in and ultimately explodes Vegapunk's lab. There was actually also another scientist who lived here who built and sent automata to the moon, but we don't really know too much about him, though it again seems very important. And next we have this little island over here called Guanhao, which is just a small forested island where we do know Cypherpol agents were sent to train at some point. Before we get too far though, there are a lot of islands here spread out close to the Red Line. So before we move on, let's hit up the underwater prison Impel Down. And this is the main prison of the world government where the worst criminals are sent to be punished. It's actually located inside of the calm belt as an extra layer of defense and protection, and is a literal hell with 6 levels for torture. There's the Crimson Hell, Wild Beast level, Starvation Hell, and the Blazing Hell. There's the Freezing Hell and the Eternal Hell, where no one ever comes out of. And then there's Newcomer Land, where everything's awesome, but it's still better than being in any of the other levels. Now, this place was dug by the revolutionary Morley, which allows prisoners to have their own little world and paradise within the prison. Now, also in the calm belt is Ruskaina, where Luffy had his training for 2 years with Rayleigh. This island is stuffed with massive powerful animals that Luffy had to fight as he learned to master Haki. It also has some of the most extreme weather that we know about, with 48 seasons throughout the year. Really, the only thing more extreme is the amount of work we put into this map we're using, and if you're enjoying it, then please consider supporting my incredible team of artists and editors and myself by joining the Patreon. Like, we've been working on this video and the map for literal months, and it is only possible thanks to the support from all my great Patreon members. And not only do you help support us here on the channel, but you also get so many cool perks, bonus content, artwork, you know, discussions only over there. Go check it out. With that being said, thanks to everyone who's already part of the Patreon, and let's get back to the map now. All right. Next island is Amazon Lily, which is also located in the calm belt, and the Kuja woman here used the dangerous sea to protect them from most pirates and invaders. And if you're wondering why, well, it's because they basically hate men. No men are allowed on this island, except Luffy, of course, who was sent here during the time skip. Turns out the women here are all hockey experts as well, but there is more to this island than just pretty women. The entire mountain is shaped like snakes, and the snakes here are pretty intelligent as they work together with the Kuja tribe. They are, fun fact, also one of the few countries that have their own currency, which is called the Gore. One person who doesn't need any more currency though is the world's strongest swordsman, Mihawk. His home turf island called Kuraigana is right over here, and it's honestly a very depressing place. It's gloomy, inspired by Tim Burton, and full of battle-hungry human drills who just want to fight anyone that they can. But it turns out it was the perfect place for Zoro to train during the time skip. Isn't that right? Alright, what you may not know though is that there was an actual kingdom here called Shikearu, which destroyed itself through war shortly before the start of the story. But now let's hit up Sabaody next, or actually what it's called Sabaody, because that place could cheer up anyone. Sabaody got it all. Shopping, amusement parks, and pirates. Like, what more could you want? Oh, right, not a slave auction or a marine base, but hey, nothing's perfect, I guess. The entire place is made up of 79 Yarukiman mangrove trees that release floating bubbles. The trees are so strong that they grow up all the way from the bottom of the ocean. Their sap is also used to coat ships so they can actually travel underwater into the new world, so this is a major stop for basically every pirate trying to, travel into the second half of the Grand Line. This is the place where Oda introduced the entire Worst Generation pirates like Kid, Trafalgar Law, Bonnie, and all the others, and it's also where the Straw Hats nearly got wiped out completely. Because after Luffy punched a Celestial Dragon at the auction house, this place got absolutely heated. They only survived because Kuma sent them all flying off into different parts of the world. Now we've got 3 more islands in Paradise to cover, and let's start with Lulusia right here. And this island is, oh well, look at that, gone. Yeah. Totally, completely wiped out. It used to be a world government kingdom, but was obliterated by the government's secret weapon, leaving just a giant gaping hole in the ocean, very similar to the one that we see at Enies Lobby. And right nearby is a marine base called G2, who were the first ones to report that Lulusia was completely gone. That's not all we know about this place though, because Ace snuck in here during his cover story and set them up with some nice milk from Lulusia. I guess they're gonna have to find a new supplier at this point. Now though, it's time for the big bad marine base that is basically at the center of the world. Marineford. This was Marine HQ during the pre-time skip part of the story, located right up against the Red Line before it was then later relocated to the other side of the Red Line. Now the island itself is basically like a crescent moon with a large bay and used to house all of the marine offices and houses for the military families. This was the site of the Summit War where Whitebeard and Luffy tried to rescue Ace. And that battle basically completely destroyed the entire island. Besides its military power though, this is also the main safe way for government officials and citizens to cross from Paradise into the new world. There are these giant gondolas that take you up to the Red Line, then you can walk across and go back down the other side. Which means it is now time to talk about the Holy Land, Marijoa. This is the home of the Celestial Dragons, where pretty much all of the original 20 ruling families who formed the world government now live. And there's a lot going on here because they've basically created their own little artificial paradise by making a forest and river that flow through here. There's a moving walkway for guests to use, though that is powered by slaves, just like everything else up here is powered by slaves. And the town where most of the Celestial Dragons live is called the Domain of the Gods, and then of course we have the Pangaea Castle, where we usually see the Gorosei during their business here, as well as the other special meetings like the Reverie. But there are also some deep and dark secrets here with the world's secret ruler Imu and his secret garden. Plus there's a whole frozen section of the castle that we think might be down below the castle but don't really know for sure. And this is all one of Oda's classic, I'll show you a little bit of this but don't expect to see any more answers for like 300 to 500 chapters. Now, before we do move on to our next blue here though, let me mention some other islands that we do know are in the Grand Line but don't know exactly where they are located. There is Aoi Island, which is the island that Admiral Fujitora lived on before he joined the Marines. We have Shadeport, which is the town that Blackbeard grew up on as a child. Then there's Vida, which is yet another country whose government was overthrown with the help of the Revolutionary Army. We have the Bourgeois Kingdom, where Cavendish is from, and also the Porco Kingdom, which is the hometown of Kuma's friend Ginny. Next up is the Vodka Kingdom, which is a world government affiliated one, but also the place that Kaido grew up in. And finally, there's a place called Mount Kintoki, which is where Sentomaru grew up and first met Dr. Vegapunk. But speaking now of places with a shocking past, let's head over to the West Blue famous for 2 islands that the world government decided to completely wipe off the map. But I do want to start with the Elysia Kingdom here, which is a world government kingdom ruled by King Caesar. And what's really interesting about this one is that one of its past kings was super intent on arresting Luffy's father Dragon at the Reverie 8 years ago. Really seems like Caesar didn't like another bully showing up to the playground. Let's hop over to Torowa Island next, where honestly all we know about this place is that this guy is a musician who grew up here, and seems like he ran into some hard times with being sold as a slave and all, but his life is nowhere near as tragic as what happened on the next island. Because next up I want to talk about what is my favorite topic to talk about. Me! That's right, it's my turn, or at least my island's turn, I guess, with the island of Ohara. Yes, this was a legendary island and home to the famous Tree of Knowledge, one of the oldest things in the entire world at over 5,000 years old. And this whole tree was home to a full library full of scholars who researched all kinds of topics, but the one that brought everything crashing down was their research into the lost history and the poneglyphs. You see, the scholars here, and particularly Professor Cloud D. Clover, he was like, let's learn the actual truth about our planet, and then the world government was like, let's burn your whole island down, how about that? Which is really tragic, especially for Robin, because she was just a kid at the time and she lost everything when the island burned down, including her mother. So let's quickly get away from the tragedy and head to an island that at least sounds pretty cool on paper. This island here is home to the Ballywood Kingdom, inspired by Hollywood in America. And with a name like that, they've got to have some sort of party going on, right? Well, all we do know is that it is a world government kingdom ruled by King Hamburger. We do keep the hungry theme going on, so maybe they've got at least some good fast food, I hope. Then down here we have Wano Country, which is home to some of Luffy's allies in the Grand Fleet. And sticking with some real countries here, this place is basically China. And this is where the Jinzhou family are from, and after the events on Dressrosa, Sai here pledged his loyalty to Luffy, and his Happo Navy joined the Grand Fleet. Oh, and he also dumped his fiancée and got himself a new wife with baby 5, which, yeah, I would probably definitely approve of that switch. Moving on though, we have a small region over here called Las Camp, or Las Camp, where all we really know is that there is a town that was attacked by pirates after Whitebeard died during Marineford. Yes, not particularly specific, so this must have been one of the many places that were actually under Whitebeard's protection. Next though, let's head over to Soya Island next, where the real soy boiler, it's just another place where Admiral Fujitora worked before joining the Marines. He actually came here after his last home was destroyed, lost his money, worked as a bodyguard, and then the Marines were like, hey, you up to become Admiral, question mark? And he was like, bet. But now let's discuss the most infamous island in the entire West Blue, God Valley. This was a legendary island and home to pretty much the most insane battle of all time between the strongest pirate crew ever, the Rocks Pirates, and a team up of the Roger Pirates and the greatest marine ever, Monkey D. Garp. And it all went down on this very unfortunate island when the Celestial Dragons decided to turn the people here and their slaves into targets in a really twisted hunting game. Which honestly just really sucks for them because they didn't really have anything to do with the world government, but this battle ended up being so legendary because not only did Rocks get defeated and probably killed, but there were also a ton of overpowered devil fruits here as prizes, like Kaido's mythical dragon fruit or Kuma's pawpaw fruit, so figure that this is one of the most important events ever in all of One Piece. What you may not know though is that the world government stole something from Rocks and his home island, so we can assume that he really came here trying to get back whatever was taken from him. Now, what could that treasure have been? We actually have no idea, and I would love to tell you where exactly God Valley was located, but it no longer exists because Rocks and the entire island of God Valley were pretty much wiped off the map and out of the history books. This is also the place that Roger most likely picked up baby Shanks after he was lost / abandoned by his family. But you know what else is abandoned? our knowledge of these next islands, because even though we know a few things about them, we have no idea once again where they actually are located. Things like the All Blue, which is Sanji's dream, or the legendary Emerald City that was mentioned during the Jaya arc, or the remains of the ancient kingdom, or the very mysterious Nakroa, also known as Dreamland. Then we also know that there are 3 other massive country-sized bridges in the world called Vodka Wolf, Rum Wolf, and Bourbon Wolf, and I guess we can assume that they're in the South, North, and West Blue, but we really have no idea for sure. There's also the mysterious Land of Ice, which sounds like Antarctica, where the demon giant Ors died, but are there a North and South Pole even in this world? Like, I don't know. Oda never really gave us a clue here. And that's not all though, because there are so many more islands with characters from the story that we just don't know where they actually are. Like the Standing Kingdom, where Orlumbus of the Grand Fleet is from, or the Rommel Kingdom, where Cavendish's evil after ego Hakuba went on a murderous rampage. Then there's the Pepe Kingdom, which is notable because it was the first time we saw a citizen claim a bounty on a marine when this guy killed Captain T-Bone. Rip my dude. He was a real one, by the way. And if you love wine, you would love to visit Miquois, I think is how to pronounce this, if you can find it. But if you want something a little bit more spicy, there is Mount Maori, which is a volcano where Big Mom got some lava rocks for her tea party. Then we have the Sankang Kingdom, ruled by Vincent here, who was quite concerned about getting rid of the warlord system. And then the coolest of these abandoned islands is Elysia, the island where Uta was left by Shanks during film Red. So it's not really canon, but Uta is canon, so it's fine to pretend like the island exists, right? I don't even know how to categorize it, so I put it in this video just to be complete, I guess. Now, that's enough of unknown places for now though. Let's go on and hop into the North Blue, which I like to call the Sea of Law's tragic backstory instead. Seriously, there was emotional trauma all over this place, starting with Flevens and the White City. Now this place was already beautiful with pure white trees and grass, but it got real famous when they started mining emberlat, which could be made into beautiful white pottery and dishes. The only bad thing here was that this stuff is highly toxic, and the citizens of the White City started getting sick after a few generations. This then led to neighboring kingdoms to basically wipe them all out because they thought it was contagious, which is how Law lost his entire family as a kid. But that of course started Law's own personal journey to find a cure, and his path eventually led him to the Doflamingo Pirates. Dofi actually started his gang right over here at Downs Island, and this stump is where he and his top officers first decided to form a pirate crew. But then over here we have the place where Law actually first joined them, which is called Spider Miles. This place is an industrial area with a waste processing plant, but more importantly, it is where Doflamingo settled after he returned from his attempt to rejoin the Celestial Dragons. Then down here is a place called Rakish, where Doflamingo and his gang attacked for some unknown reason. But now we're gonna go head back up here because this is where the sale of the Ope Ope no Mi took place. Because in case you forgot, Law and Doflamingo's brother Corazon were trying to intercept this fruit that was being sold by this guy right here. Now, the sale was supposed to go down on Rubec Island over here, but everyone found out that the fruit was on Minion Island, so they all came here to steal it instead. And this is a very snowy island with a broken down town and ruined palace, but more importantly, this is where Corazon stole the fruit successfully, gave it to Law, and then sacrificed himself. Literally the definition of a true homie. Though Big Mom might disagree. Now, the other island in this region is Swallow Island, and this is home of Law's best friends Bippo, Sachi, and Penguin. Law came here to this bird-shaped island after losing Corazon, and these four would eventually go on to form the Heart Pirates. Now though, let's move way up here through to the Quinn village, which is the home of another Doflamingo pirate officer, Baby 5. Too bad that she was abandoned by her parents because they didn't have any food, which led to her issues with men until she finally met Sai. And then way over here is Whiteland Kingdom, which is not where Whitebeard's from, but yet another world government nation ruled by King Iwatobi. And we don't really know anything about it, but I do wonder if it is an icy place because Iwatobi always were some serious mysteriously cold-looking snow gear. I mean, the gear is looking warm, but you get the idea. I think where he's from is pretty cold. Next up is the Livneal Kingdom, which is home to the once famous explorer Mont Blanc Nolans. You hopefully remember him from the Skypiea flashback, the absolute chat who became friends with the Shandians and killed the big snake. Yeah, he's from this place, but they truly didn't deserve him because after he found the City of Gold, he tried to take his king there, but the island was simply gone. You know, the entire being blasted into the sky thing. So the king called Nolan a liar and executed him back home. Then just down here we have the Duel Kingdom, which is surprisingly a tongue twister because I want to keep saying duel, but anyways, this place is another world government kingdom ruled by King Chap here. What a good chap, but it does seem to be a pretty powerful place because other kingdoms at the Reverie seem to think that the Duel Kingdom was more powerful than many of the others present there. Which does take us now to Loguetown, which seems to be a pretty boring place despite being wealthy because this is where Bellamy grew up before he got bored and set out to become a pirate. But our last location in the North Blue is actually not on our map, and that's because the Germa Kingdom, you know, the despicable kingdom that Sanji's family rules, yeah, they come from here and actually ruled over the entire blue for an entire 66 days. Yeah, not sure how they got overthrown that quickly, but I thought it was worth mentioning at least because it's really funny. Alright, so with that, we're done with the blues, we've done Paradise, let's dive underwater and hit up Fishman Island. Now this one is under the sea, and there's actually a ton of really cool stuff around here before you even get to Fishman Island, like the deep sea currents, or stuff like literal underwater waterfalls, volcanoes, and other areas where no light ever reaches that are home to some pretty nightmarish monsters. But all of that changes when we get to Fishman Island because here the Sunlight Tree Eve's roots shine like a megawatt light bulb, making this place a true underwater paradise. And I do know that some people hate on the arc, but the design of the Ryugu Kingdom is just absolutely beautiful. You've got coral reefs, bubble domes, and a dragon palace. You can really tell Oda was having a lot of fun artistically here. That's not the only impressive thing though, because Fishman Island also houses an enormous, almost country-sized ship, the Noah, and a poneglyph. Now unfortunately, this island is also kind of divided into rich and poor quarters, and of course this arc was all about the persecution of the fishermen people from the outside world. In fact, they only came to live down here because there was so much racism up on the surface, but after Luffy defeated the evil fishman Hody Jones, I think there's real hope that fishmen and humans can actually work and live together. Now this actually isn't the only underwater kingdom in the One Piece world, it turns out though, and if you're an anime only fan, you might not even know that there is, for example, a goldfish empire or the headband catfish village. So there's actually loads more going on under the sea than just Fishman Island. So once we come actually up from the sea, we're gonna pop right over to the big new shiny marine base, New Marineford, very creatively named. Basically, Akainu decided to move the Marine HQ here during the time skip to show that he was not scared of pirates like the Empress who dominate the New World part of the Grand Line. This place used to be the G1 Marine base, but that base just took the old Marineford's place back on the other side in Paradise. There is yet another marine base close by though, because G5 over here is also quite close to the Grand Line. Vice Admiral Smoker requested a transfer here during the time skip because he wasn't quite giving up yet on capturing Luffy, though that didn't last very long, and this place is known for being quite the problem base, but Smoke and Tashigi cleaned it up real quick and, you know, made it effective. Now, the Straw Hats of course really messed things up in the New World. You see, once you come into the New World, you usually have 3 options for islands you can go to, because just like with the start of Paradise, there are many different paths you can actually take to get to the end, and you also need a different and new log pose because the magnetic fields in the New World are just off the charts bonkers. They change all the time, so you need 3 needles to actually make sure you're always pointing towards one stable island. But the 3 options here are Mystoria Island, Raijin Island, and Risky Red Island. And the only one we really know anything about is Raijin Island because that's the one with the lightning that acts like me when I, you know, take too many shots of espresso in the morning. That's what I feel like my brain looks like at that point. But the Straw Hats didn't go to any of these 3, as you probably realized, like a normal crew would. Nope. Instead, they heard a distress call from Punk Hazard, and so they sailed over there, got kidnapped, and ended up taking down the psychotic scientist Caesar Clown. But let me say, this island's design is absolutely amazing. It actually used to be a pretty tropical tropical, normal summer island with Dr. Vegapunk's lab here, but it all came crushing down when Caesar blew up the island because he was jealous of Vegapunk. That's how it basically became an abandoned wasteland, but we're not done with the transformations here because Punk Hazard was also the site of Admiral Akaino and Kuzan's duel to decide who got to become the fleet admiral, and their powers are so broken with their awakened Logia fruits that they permanently changed the entire landscape into half frozen, half burning molten lava wastelands. On this Pokeball-shaped island though, the Straw Hats then found their way to Dressrosa. And this island was 1,000,000,000% inspired by Spain and is known for its flower fields and its passionate citizens, but unfortunately it was taken over by Doflamingo, who turned the entire kingdom into his own puppet show. And of course we just can't forget the notable landmarks here. There's the Corrida Coliseum where the gladiators duked it out for the fire fruit, and besides taking down Dofi, the most important thing that Luffy and his crew did here was destroying the artificial devil fruit factory where Dofi and Caesar made smile fruits for the Emperor Kaido. And there's actually a bunch of neighboring islands that we should mention as well. There's the Wild Forest Island Greenbit where the Tontada dwarves live that is actually connected to Dressrosa through a bridge. Then we have Apple 9 Island where the whole vibe is apples, and you might have guessed it, bananas. No, I'm just kidding. It's apples. And there's also the Prudence Kingdom ruled by King Elizabello, you know, the guy with the massive Donkey Kong charge-up punch. We have the Majaitska Kingdom where one of the gladiators, Rolling Logan, was from as well. And after Dressrosa though, the Straw Hats then sailed to one of the few islands that actually move. I guess we had Thriller Bark, but another one, Zo. This is home to the animal mink tribe, and it travels around on the back of the giant, and I mean giant, elephant Zunisha, who wanders around the sea after committing some unknown crime in the past. Now the city or country of Zo itself is one big forest, and all the buildings are built into the trees. If Tarzan had a kingdom in One Piece, I guess this would be it. And there's even a whale tree, and the minks get showered by an explosion of water from Zunisha's trunk. And lucky for the minks, the Straw Hats came here when they did because Chopper and his group saved them all from deadly poison gas after Kaido's men attacked the island. This is also where we first learned about the road poneglyphs, so really it was the island that kind of kicked off the final push to really finding Laugh Tale. And this was actually the place where the Straw Hats split up, and we're gonna split over here to Port Chibaralta. Now this place was under Whitebeard's protection, and we actually saw that in action in the Ace novel. What happened here is that a woman named Oliva, not to be confused with Robin's mom Olbia, started some pretty nasty slavery deals here on the island, so Ace came up and cleaned it all up. Next though, we're heading to Broccoli Island, which just like it sounds is an island which like, you know, huge trees shaped like broccoli. And there was a war going on here, and one side hired Sanji's family to help them win the battle once and for all. And this island is actually very close to Big Mom's territory, but before the Straw Hats sailed into Whole Cake Island, they ran into the Hot Sea, which is a stretch of ocean that is pretty much boiling. Once they got through there though, it was straight into Big Mom's realm, Totland. And honestly, it is super impressive the sheer number of islands that she has in her immediate territory. Yeah, I do know that the other Yonko have territories that they protect, but this is Big Mom's home, and it is just really big. Like, she's definitely winning the territory game here, I think. But let's talk about the main island, Whole Cake Island. This is where Big Mom's castle is, and most of her children live too. There's also the Seducing Woods, which is just basically a whole forest on a massive trip, and we pretty much know what happens here. Luffy and part of the crew break in, trash the wedding, rescue Sanji, steal the poneglyphs, and then dip out of there with Big Mom chasing them down. But that's of course not the only part of Totland. We saw a bunch of other islands and many that we didn't see, but you can see all the others on the screen right here. And for your and my sanity, we'll just speed through this one. All right. There's 100% Island, Biscuit Island, Black Island, Cacao Island, and Candy Island. Then there's Cheese Island, Cutlery Island, Flavor Island, Funari Island, and Fotoro Island. We have Ice Island, my favorite Jam Island, and Jelly Island, Kibo Island, Kimi Island, Kinoko Island, and Komogi Island. Take me to Liquor Island and Loving Island, but not Margarine Island or Mileage Island. There's also Noko Island and Nuts Island, Package Island, Pai Pai Island, Potpourri Island, and Potato Island. Finally, we have Sanchoku Island, Tangia Island, Topping Island, Unique Island, and Yakigashi Islands. Alright, wow, that is a lot of food-themed islands right there. My god. Some of them we know more about, though, like Cacao Island, where the Straw Hats first stranded, and literally everything is made from chocolate. Nice. And also biscuits. And then there's also where Sanji made Big Mom's cake before they dropped it off on Liquor Island. Now, each of these individual islands are ruled by a member of Big Mom's family, and I do think that by the end of the story, this is going to be Luffy's favorite place to just chill, since he can just eat all the food that he wants. After leaving Big Mom's territory, though, we have an island where Shanks hung out in the pre-time skip. This is Yukiryu Island, and it's got one of the coldest and coolest rock formations in the story, with these twisting dragon mountains all over the place. And we're not even close to being done with the Yonko yet, because next is Karaibari Island, which is the new home of Emperor Buggy and his cross-guild organization. It used to be home of Buggy's delivery service before Buggy upgraded, but now they're collecting bounties on Marines, which is basically the exact opposite of this next island, which is about as dry and barren as you can get, because this is Baltigo, the former home of the Revolutionary Army, and as you can see, it's basically just a pile of rocks, but Dragon called it home until one of Blackbeard's officers snuck on their ship and called the rest of the crew to destroy the entire base. Then there's this island over here called the Mogaro Kingdom, where we met the Funk Brothers from the Colosseum Medal in Dressrosa, and next up is Wano, though, which is very easily the most complicated geography in the entire story. I mean, this is the land of the samurai, and the Straw Hats come here to take down Kaido, who turned the country into his own personal weapon factory. And first up, you'll see that the entire island is surrounded by massive walls, and you have to climb a waterfall that flows upwards to even reach the top. And then on top, you reach a massive lake that looks like an ocean, and in the center is the main Wano Country. Now, this island is made up of many regions, including the Flower Capital, Kuri, Udon, Kibi, Ringo, and Hakumai, each with their own weather patterns and climate. Off to the side, then, we have a giant skull, and this is the island of Onigashima, Kaido's stronghold, and the location of Luffy's final big clash with the Emperor. As you can see, the geography is so weird and quirky that it's often speculated that the entire island was pulled together by demon giant continent pullers, since each part of the island has completely different climates from the others, and there is a giant skull that would explain all that. There's even an underwater part of the city that was formed once the walls of Wano were built. Now, unfortunately for the old city, rainwater then filled up the hole, which is how we have the giant ocean-sized lake inside of these walls. And Wano also holds the ancient weapon Pluton somewhere within these walls, as well as one of the road poneglyphs. Plus, I forgot to mention an active volcano, which is where Big Mom and Kaido ended up after being defeated. Then during the Wano arc, we also learned about Sphinx Island, which is Whitebeard's home island. And this place is now under the protection of Whitebeard's second-in-command Marco, and it's got a nice peaceful place that's even hidden in a small valley. There are wild Sphinx animals too that the locals have basically tamed into pets. And we even saw one of them in Impel Down. And then over here is Winter Island, which is kind of your basic rocky type of island where Blackbeard ambushed Law and wiped out his entire crew. Blackbeard really likes to pick these bare islands to fight his battles for some reason, but I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't really have an explanation. Even Blackbeard's home, actually, Hachinosu, also known as Pirate Island, is honestly pretty plain. I mean, sure, there is the giant skull that Pizarro here can make come to life, but that's basically it. And the rest of his pirate paradise is just kind of shantytown, which seems so flimsy. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets destroyed more often than Zoro takes a nap. And even though Blackbeard rules here now, he took this place over from Ochoku, who was a member of the Rocks Pirates. And we also know that this used to be Rocks' pirate base way back 40 years ago too, so it does seem like this island is just full of evil pirate vibes and seems to have some sort of importance that we just don't quite understand yet. It also supposedly is home to a mysterious treasure that Rocks kept there, but again, we don't really know anything about that yet. And so instead of frying our brains over this, let's instead keep moving over here, because next is G14, a marine base right in the middle of all of these Yonko territories. And it's actually a very unique base because most of the members we see here are part of the special marine group Sword, who are kind of like a rogue marine entity that can kind of do whatever they want off the record. And also nearby is Egghead Island, which just got a major makeover once Vegapunk set up shop here about 4 years ago. Like seriously, it's impressive how he turned this winter island into a land of futuristic buildings and research labs with climate control that works so well, it changed the winter island into a tropical paradise. And I gotta say, this is probably where I'd want to live if I'm being honest. Like, we have a lower city on the island called the Fabrio phase where people live. Above that, in the artificial island clouds, is the Labo phase with all of Vegapunk's labs. And then way up at the top is Punk Records, which basically just houses Vegapunk's enormous mega brain. And of course, Luffy and the crew showed up here and tried to save Vegapunk while fighting off both Admiral Kizaru and all of the demonic Gorosei. Now, before we do get to the literally biggest island in all of One Piece though, let me just quickly mention some of the other islands we do know are somewhere in the New World, but they don't really show up on any map. Starting with Gartle Island, which is an island under the protection of Shanks. There's also the Dorena Kingdom, which I put over here, which was home to some of the gladiators who fought in the Colosseum on Dressrosa. Then there's Food Vulton, which is another island that was protected by Whitebeard. Once Whitebeard died though, pirates attacked the villagers here until the former Worst Generation member Basil Hawkins showed up and defeated all the pirates. Then we have Wetheria, which is the floating island up in the sky where Nami was sent during the time skip and is home to a bunch of weather scientists. There is the Balloon Terminal, which is the place that Kaido jumped off of before landing on Kid's old base in the New World. And there's also the Sky Island Burka, which was the home to people like Enel and most likely Uruj before Enel destroyed it. And I actually do believe personally that Burka might be very close to our next big island here. Very big, Elbaf, land of the giants, the single largest island in One Piece. Seriously, it's like this island ate every other island we talked about so far for breakfast. It is built on the stupidly massive treasure tree Atom, and this place is very special in more ways than just one. Do you remember how we said that Egghead had its own artificial climate? Well, Vegapunk copied the climate of Elbaf because it is perfect for things like island clouds to form, and I also wonder if this climate lets things grow way bigger, like the tree and the people who live there. But you see, the basic layout of Elbaf is split into 3 levels, 3 realms. There's the underworld realm, which is this frozen mountainy wasteland at the bottom of the tree where enormous wild animals roam. Kind of sounds like a playground for Luffy, honestly. Then moving up, we have the sun realm, where most of the giant villages are located, including Elbaf village, where most of the giants that we know live. And then way up at the top of the tree is the heavenly realm, which we don't really know anything about quite yet, but it does seem like maybe water flows down from there. Also notably, Elbaf has never been conquered by the world government so far, so its culture has been preserved all the way back from the Void Century. There's also a ton of ancient history here from the Harley text and this jaw-dropping mural. We're not quite sure, but Luffy and the gang are currently battling the Holy Knights here, so who knows actually what's gonna happen next on Elbaf. And after that, there is a ton that we don't know about, like somewhere over here must be Lodestar, the publicly known last island of the Grand Line, and the final place where all the paths of the Grand Line actually lead. Now this is actually also where you're supposed to first learn about the poneglyphs, so Luffy and the gang kind of just got a cheat code there, but it must be fairly hard to reach because as far as we know, only Roger and his crew have ever made it there, at least in the last how many 100 years. Although I will say it's possible that someone else like Rox's crew did also come here as well, since many of those crewmates like Kaido and Big Mom did know about the poneglyphs too. And then of course, somewhere out here in this world map is Love Tail. But where is it? Underwater? In the sky? In the belly of a whale? Not really sure at this point, but there is one very likely candidate that we already mentioned today, and that is Enies Lobby right here. If you want to know why I think there's a good chance that Laugh Tail might be down here or what is down here, you can check out this video right here. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching this entire video. Shanks so much for watching this entire video. It was a lot of fun putting it together, so it would really mean a lot if you share it, like, subscribe. Also, thank you to all of our Patreons, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to turn this map into some merch too, let me know, and I will see you in the next video. All right,